Okay, so welcome to the first meeting of the Needham Biosafety Committee. I figured first we can, since it's our first meeting, do some quick introductions of all the members. So my name is Julie McCarthy, and I am the epidemiologist and data analyst for the Public Health Division. I've been there for a couple of years. Prior to that, I worked for an IACUC, an Animal Care and Use Committee, and after that, I worked in a microbiology lab studying Lyme disease for a few years, which is how I sort of got involved in this project of revamping Needham's biosafety regulation. Sai, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Sai Palani. I'm the full-time environmental health agent for the Needham Public Health Division. I've been working here for the past 6 months, and prior to this, I was a health agent and for other towns in Massachusetts that have experience with inspections. So I think my side of things would be doing the actual inspections of the facilities.
Thanks. Justin?
Sure, Justin McKellen. I resident in Needham. I work at Novartis Pharmaceuticals, where I do emergency management, business continuity, and crisis management. I do that from within the Environmental Health and Safety Department, or because we're Swiss, it's HSC as opposed to EHS. I did that for about 8 years. Prior to that, I was in EHS in Dana-Farber, working in their doing both emergency management and crisis management, but doing that also within EHS, so kind of side by side with a lot of EHS officers. I've also served on Novartis's and Dana-Farber's IACUC. Prior to that, I have a number of years in pre-hospital care, both direct patient care as well as administration for pre-hospital ambulance services throughout the Boston area. Yeah, and this is actually my 5th committee in Needham, so I'm kind of very involved in town government. But that's what we're showing.
Well, thank you for making the time. It's a lot of committees.
It is.
John?
Yeah, hi. John Portman, Needham resident. I'm currently the director of immunology at a small biotech in Cambridge. So we're developing microneedle vaccine patches, which is pretty cool. Academic training, I'm an infectious disease PhD, trained at UC Berkeley and Harvard Medical, and then made the transition to industry, where I've been working on vaccine development basically the entire time.
Thanks. And Ed?
Yeah, I'm started out as PhD in microbiology from Ohio State University. Then I taught at UMass Boston for about 10 years. Then I worked for the State Department of Public Health for about 10 years. And I have been working at Children's Hospital for close to 30 years. And I'm been on the Biosafety Committee at Children's for 12 years.
Great. Thanks, everybody. We do have a few folks on the Zoom right now. I didn't get any comments ahead of the meeting, but if anyone on the Zoom has a comment, you can raise your hand and we can allow you to talk. And if not, then we'll move on to the next item. Okay, so we'll move on. Quickly wanted to put on the agenda a discussion of chair and co-chair positions. I think this is really just important so that we have someone who can guide the meeting every time. So I'm sort of going to propose and see what your thoughts are on having, for now, me be the chair and Sai be our co-chair while we get the logistics and sort of the cadence of these meetings down pat and start to, understand the workings of them. And then we can sort of go back at some future period, I don't know, 6 months or a year or something like that, and readdress that and see if we want to reassign chair and co-chair.
No objection.
That makes sense to me. I think get it started.
Yeah. At some point, is the chair, so the process for like renewals and stuff, is there any aspect that's like administrative review where only the chair would have to respond and approve things? Is there any extra things there, or is it always like committee decisions?
I think as we've written it, it'll always be committee decisions, and then, the chair. And I think this is where there's some ease of having a staff member be a chair or co-chair, would communicate with the company probably about what it is that would be needed or modified. And so Sai and I would be able to sort of do that in our role as chair or co-chair, and also our role as staff members communicating with the company. But otherwise, yeah, I think it would all be committee decisions.
Cool, sounds good.
Okay, so I think we need to formally vote on this. So can I have a?
I'll make a motion to have Julie McCarthy as chair of the Biosafety Committee and Sal Plani as vice chair of the Biosafety Committee.
I'll second that.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
And Julie, aye. All right, great. Thank you. And thank you for bearing with me here, because I am not usually hosting these meetings. So I'm sure that it's gonna be clunky and I'm gonna forget to do things. Justin, you seem to have a lot of experience there, so I'll rely on you.
No problem.
And Ed. All right, so we can move on to review of the application for the biosafety permit. So you all received the application materials ahead of time. And that included all of the attachments that they included per our, regulation requirements. So we can certainly open it up if there's someone who has specific comments they want to address, or we can sort of one by one review the documents from the application and see what our thoughts are. Does anyone have any sort of thoughts off the bat, or do you want me to go through piece by piece?
Is there any of the IBC information that was part of this? Because I think everything that was sent so far is like incredibly generic.
Yeah.
So it's tough about a lot of my questions are about scale, what they're actually using, what the intended purpose are. I did sleuth the company a lot, honestly, to figure out what they're trying to accomplish.
So there should have been included in there, there was their list of IBC members, and then they had another attachment that was in that combined document of the organism, the containment level, the screening process, and the decontamination process. Not incredibly detailed, but gave you an idea of the agents they were working with. And then, I think a lot of that other information was in that biosafety manual.
Okay, I guess typically in my experience, we've always written up study protocols that give a little bit more specifics on scale, individual containment practices, workflows. It seems like based on the layout that they're doing quite a bit of manufacturing here. I see clean rooms, I see an ISO 8 anti-room. So scale just becomes a little bit more important, I think, because a lot of these, like anything, a lot of these things are a very different story if you're dealing with 200 milliliters versus 200 liters. So that's honestly my biggest question at this point.
So I think that's a great point. And I think, I think we ask, and Sai, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we do ask in theory in an annual review of this for their IBC minutes, but we don't ask them for their IBC protocols or their, so it's tough. I've only come from an academic setting, so I don't know how this works in smaller companies. But traditionally you have your overall biosafety plan, and then you had your individual biosafety protocols that you would essentially submit to the biosafety committee, and they would review, and that had a lot of that nitty-gritty specifics on what it is that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So potentially we wouldn't have that until next year for the reapplication, because this is obviously the new process.
Right.
We didn't ask for that in step one. And just for context, this company has operated in Needham for how long already?
It's been 1 or 2 years.
1 or 2. Okay, got it.
So
But I get the concern that John's bringing up. I mean, because yes, this is boilerplate. And it's fine. I've seen actually worse. like significantly worse. But this is a good template, but it doesn't give the nitty gritties, especially when it comes down to scale. And even saw in one comment in here, they even had one BSC, but I don't think that they have 2 production rooms. So I don't know where that incongruence. I'm trying to find it again, but I don't know if you want to kind of go section by section, but I do see the concern that John is bringing up. Obviously, this is a company that we already know is operating for 2 years, and we're applying a new standard. So we might have to kind of keep that in the context of our discussion, and perhaps use that to maybe even hone the process for other companies. I know we have a second one that's operating, but also any new companies, because this is a new process. But I think that's a decent point that John brought up, especially with regards to the actual use of the material and scale of material.
Yeah, I was mostly just trying to base my list off of, the actual biosafety regulation, Article 11, the institution shall, and then under there, it's not very long. I feel like this is a checklist, and most of these things they have on there, but like L, Institutional Biosafety Committee, pretty clearly under that is list of members with titles, including one at least community rep. B, all minutes from the IBC meetings must be forwarded to the Needham Biosafety Committee. C, a description of each protocol approved by the IBC. And I mean, submit the following documentation for new registrations and renewals is how that's listed.
Okay.
So it seems pretty cut and dry. I know this is a new process, so I think it's all just in the context of trying to make sure that we're accurately assessing.
I think we could ask for
risk.
it. It's in the regulation, so we could ask for it. I don't think we asked for it on the application itself. So maybe that's a change we can make for next year, maybe, or for future applicants. We didn't have that explicitly on the application, so maybe that's the reason why they never submitted it. But
Okay.
that's something we could change, and then we could ask for it for this applicant right now.
Yeah, agreed. I think that was definitely, so, the old regulation had its XYZ requirements, very few requirements, online for the online permitting system. And Sai and I went through, and it took hours, I think, for us to revamp and add all the attachments that they needed and the check boxes. And I think honestly, that's probably an oversight on our part that we didn't include that those attachments needed to be there. So yeah, we can certainly add that in and then ask for these attachments. I think one thing we have to probably bear in mind with this is just how we can, or they can ensure to us, like what things really need to be labeled as confidential or redacted in some way, because this could all be requested, the public could request this information. And so I think that'll just be something that we'll have to maybe figure out the logistics of, so that we're not revealing any proprietary secrets here. But I think we can certainly ask for this.
Yeah.
I think that's an important point, because all these become public documents, and we have to.
Oh, Ed, I think you're on mute now.
Yeah, some of my my connection's breaking.
Uh-oh, I think we might have lost him. Oh, there we go. Can you hear us still?
I'm here. My connection's unstable.
But you're speaking to, yeah, the confidentiality aspect. Yeah, which I definitely, as we were making this regulation, I remember that being something that I think that we had discussed with town council at one point, but we may have to continue that conversation when adding this requirement back in.
It's a decent point. I mean, coming from the private sector, it is a decent point. I wouldn't want to necessarily, you have to be cognizant of what you're asking for and how you're asking for it. And this, if we ask for additional information, I don't necessarily think they're still operating under the old biosafety regulation, correct? So any sort of pause on this process wouldn't necessarily stop them from operating within the town of Needham, correct?
No.
Because I also don't want to stop them by us asking for supplemental information based on our application process. Because they're already an existing company, I just don't want to, put anything, that would prohibit them until waiting for our decision on, either asking for more information or vetting or having a conversation with regards to scale. Because I think we're running into some hiccups within the actual application process, and because I think everything else they have this template, the boilerplate. I think they're doing like a lot of a lot of companies. There's nothing that's concerning, but nonetheless, the information that we want, we just want to make sure that we can get it and obviously keep it secure, and feel comfortable.
Sai, can you just verify that, like right now, I don't know, internally in the application system, that they're able to continue on, like their permit is not expired?
Well, so I guess technically per the regulations, the previous permit has expired when we introduced this new regulation, because I think it had a couple of months to get on board with this new regulation, but we're already like well past that date. So I think technically they're not really operating under us, but it's basically on us for not moving fast enough on our end. But I think we should take our time with this and try to make sure that everything's submitted the right way. And we're okay with it before we re-permit them for this cycle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I want to make sure that we don't stop them, but it's on us, and we should fix our, dot our T's and dot our I's. We don't dot our T's and cross our I's. We dot our I's and cross our T's, because I think that's going to be happening. And then they can still operate, and then we can, kind of bring them through a new process.
Yeah, and we're definitely, Sai's point, we are definitely behind in just the amount of time that it took us from approval of regulation to creation of committee. So we're technically within like their, we've set sort of a time period within that application that we're currently within. But I think we've definitely exceeded the time that it took in theory for them to reapply for this permit, because we took so long to establish a committee. So yeah, I definitely think for these companies that are existing within town, there's going to have to be some sort of a variance to all of our thought processes here. And then, going forward with new companies, we'll make sure that we've got it together.
Sure.
Okay. Any other thoughts, aside from sort of needing some of those specifics? I did want to bring up sort of a something that I realized this morning, actually, and that I think will probably come up in the future for these companies that are applying. Because we've done sort of an interesting thing, and this was common in other municipalities that had a regulation, is that they say within their town, regardless of whether you're receiving NIH funding and you are then beholden to the NIH guidelines, we would sort of like you to be beholden to the NIH guidelines. We're telling you that even though you're not receiving funding and you're not reporting to them, we'd still like you to check these boxes from those regulations. But I think one place where, we wrote it kind of vague, we said you should follow the NIH guidelines. And then we have this sort of one section in our regulation about the IBC membership, the list of members with titles, including one representative from Needham, the minutes, et cetera. I think one place where companies will probably run into a snag is that IBC membership, where technically per the NIH guidelines, you're required to have, 5 members, and at least 2 of them need to be community members unaffiliated with the institution who represent the community or communities surrounding. And now we did put in a caveat saying we'd like at least one community representative from Needham. But I noticed, with their IBC list, and I imagine the IBCs of other similar companies, that there is a Needham resident, but they're all affiliated with the company. And I think this is sort of a thought process for us, maybe for this application and for future applications, of where we find the importance of having those 2 community members, or, again, I think there is some knowledge and awareness here that we're not trying to make their lives harder. We're just trying to make sure that they're doing everything right. And so whether we think that that's an important thing to keep, hey, you should be following the NIH guidelines, or whether we should put in a caveat that says, you know, you should have an IBC. It doesn't need to have 2 community members from outside. And whether, you know, having this review by the Needham Biosafety Committee with, you know, 3 Needham residents on it right now with Justin, John, and Ed, if that sort of represents the Needham resident voice. So I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
So in concept, a review of IBC minutes by the Biosafety Committee would meet the spirit of what that's intended. Of course, you're looking at now lagging, as opposed to, you know, having, obviously, you know, having the CEO as the Needham resident, you know, isn't necessarily in the spirit of what, you know, having that connection to the local municipality, the jurisdiction that the company is operating in. That's obviously, you know, a little, that's not in the spirit of, I think, what the intended of the regulation is. So obviously, I don't think we need to burden some of these companies and say there has to be, you know, 2 to 3. There should be 1. I don't know if it's what the risk tolerance is, and I'd love to hear from John or Ed or anybody else. So, you know, whether a lagging review of IBC minutes by the committee is acceptable, you know, or whether we need to have someone, you know, on the IBC, et cetera, you know, like there is in other companies. So I just kind of see what others feel about that.
I love the idea on paper.
Yeah.
In practice, having been on all of these I've been on a lot of IBCs for different years and different institutions. It's always the hardest part of convening an IBC. And then it always winds up just being somebody's friend, roommate, something, acquaintance, or you're asking the town's biosafety committee to recommend somebody because they can't find anybody. And we've had good people, good community representatives that ask decent questions, but you're almost never finding someone like technically proficient enough that's actually going to call out lapses. And if there's anything nefarious going on, they're not going to bring it to the IBC anyways. That's right. Like they're just not going to talk about it at an IBC meeting. So while I really love it on paper, in practice, I think it's just it's less beneficial than it sounds like it should be. I really appreciate being a resident and being able to sit on this and having purview into that. I think that's really good. So I don't know if someone feels really strongly about having an advocate on like every company's IBC, but the utility,
I think that could get
my
burdensome.
perspective, has been limited. Sorry, go ahead.
I think having an advocate on every committee can get burdensome very quickly.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. I think again, right, it all sounds great on paper. And in an ideal world, it would not be so difficult to find a community representative or 2 community representatives and you know, take their availability into account every time you were having an IBC meeting. But it is logistically difficult, and I definitely do sympathize with the fact that these companies, again, are not necessarily beholden to the NIH regulations, and we're asking them for these requirements that they are not federally required to follow. So I think that's going to be a conversation that we can have with the Board of Health, you know, who writes this and approves these regulations, and that can be a recommendation that, you know, perhaps we're making as the Biosafety Committee to find a way to alter that language where we can fit something in there. You know, I don't know if we feel we can say you can just have the Biosafety Committee, or if we feel we want someone to be a member of a community. You know, is there any requirement that we feel like we should include there, or should it just be, hey, we want you to have a Biosafety Committee and we want you to show that you're meeting, you have minutes, you have protocols?
Go back and forth, really. I mean, it's one of these things where it's like, yes, a company that's been existing for a couple of years, certainly, but then, you know, the whole point of, I shouldn't say the whole point, but one driving factor was, a large research facility was going to be, plunked down, where Muzzy Ford was, that potentially could, and so that was one of the driving impacts of, let's say, do we need to update our process so that we do make sure that we, vet the institutions that are coming here in our community, potentially creating a safety issue. So, yes, it's going to be burdensome. And yes, it's, obviously, to John's point, if there's anything nefarious, they're not going to bring it to the IBC because they have a residential representation on there. But, I think we need to be careful, or we need to think about the language specifically so that maybe just the committee itself, and the committee can designate someone to go, right? And to represent, but it doesn't name an individual. It doesn't, because I think it's going to be dependent on the size and scale of future companies that come here. And that was our remit from the BOH. We need to be able to vet. This was a concern that was coming from, from planning and from, growth in the town, was we're obviously are trying to attract, or private companies are trying to attract, larger companies here. And we need to make sure that those companies are operating safely. And so I think we can't just say, okay, a review is fine. I think we need to find a way to do it so that it's not burdensome, but we have some review real time. I don't know, that's just me.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think, I think maybe that could be interesting language that the committee could appoint someone to go if, especially if we felt that what was being submitted wasn't enough, or there was questions about something going on, that, someone from the committee could go, or appoint someone to go and pop into those IBC meetings if needed.
Yep.
Great. So then, yeah, so we can then, we'll work on that language. Maybe Sai and I can work on perhaps drafting something along those lines, and we can bring that to the Board of Health, and get their thoughts to possibly modify the regulation.
Sure.
That's a good idea. Bring it to the board.
Okay. So are there any other thoughts on the pest control document, the floor plan, the list of organisms, emergency action plan, safety and security policy, or yeah, we've kind of discussed the biosafety.
Those are, I mean, all the safety and security and emergency management plans, those are all boilerplate. It's fine. There was nothing that was a red flag when I was reviewing it. One thing from a floor plan perspective, it didn't get down to the granularity. I just don't exactly know how many biosafety cabinets they have, and this might give an idea of what is scale. We have production suites. We have it down to the actual room level, but equipment wise, I just don't see how many BSCs we have. The level, whatever it is, the level 2. So it's not the ducted ones. It's the in-house ducting. But I just don't know how many. So, and that might lead akin to a little bit about what their scale of what they're either doing or planning to do. Just more of an inquiry.
Yeah, well, we can definitely ask for them to label those within the floor plan.
Yeah, most floor plans that I've seen that have been submitted actually go down to the furniture level. They actually think this is a fume hood, this biosafety cabinet, whatever it is. Bench. Yeah. How many employees are? Was that in here? Was there overall?
I didn't see that information anywhere.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something that when we look at reviewing, the information we're sending out, we more have, kind of an overall, front page that has, more of company information, so that we can kind of get an idea of how many employees we have, what's your location, what other locations do you operate in, is this a satellite location, or is this an actual primary work location? Because I think that's also kind of an important piece of information. So yeah, just kind of.
Yes, those can definitely be added into the online application. Okay. So unless there are other thoughts on it, so I guess where do we stand on this? So is it that we would like we can request the IBC minutes and protocols from the company, and some of that other detail, like the a little bit of more of a breakdown on the floor plan? Request that clarifying information from them and review it, and then we can decide afterwards? Or do we feel that it can be recommended for approval barring there is nothing glaring in there? Where do you feel about how you want to review prior to recommending for approval?
What's possible? Can we improve contingent on future review of that digitally or something? And like, I don't know how that works.
I think we can. I think we can do whatever whatever we want in this uncharted territory.
Just because we're meeting, just because we're all here, and not have to have it like wait until we reconvene. I mean, everything here is great. I think it's probably fine, but I think it's pretty hard to assess risk without a little bit more detail of what they're actually doing. So it would be my preference to see the rest of that just to make sure. But
so we can, we can either, because I definitely understand that the scheduling becomes difficult. We do, because like Sai said, we can take our time. We've sort of broken our time barriers here on a lot of fronts. But we do also have still plenty of time before their review period is done with this application. I think it's 60 days or 90 days. And so we could either choose to review and then reconvene again to take a vote, or, take a vote now pending there is nothing wrong with what you're reviewing in those documents. I guess it's just the level of comfort on how you all feel. And I know this is new, so it's tough.
Yeah, well, and this is the thing, it's a new process. I think yes, to John's point, I agree. Yes, you cannot, this is not enough information to do a risk assessment. However, this is a company that's been operating for 2 years currently already, and the only thing that they're falling short on is what we failed to ask them, because we have a new process and a new system. So the risk will still be there, the same level of risk. It will still be there whether we, conditionally, accept this and then ask for supplementary information that we may or may not decide to act on later on. But I think, I'm for conditionally accepting this, and then just as long as we review, the supplementary information, then I think we're all fine. But that's my point of view, and I'd love to hear others, because I've been known in my other committees to talk way too much. So I want others
I think Justin makes a good point. I think we should follow his suggestion.
Yeah, I'm also in favor of kind of approving this conditionally, and then allowing I could go by to do an inspection. I haven't done an inspection of a biosafety lab, so it'd be like a new thing that I'll be involved with. But we could always ask for any type of records, the present records for anything, and then kind of review them. Maybe any comments, we could give them back to them and make comments at that point. But I don't think we should try to prevent having them like permitted right now. We could do so right now, and then conditionally, if we see any issues, we could either revoke that approval or have them make changes and then continue permitting them. So
Great. John, do you agree? Feel free to disagree.
Yeah, that works for me. I think as long as somebody in this universe is just getting a little bit more detail, that's all that I care about.
Absolutely. And Sire, I can ask for these additional documents and clarifications from them, and then those materials can just be passed to everybody on the committee for review and comment.
Cool. Sounds great.
So I make a motion to conditionally accept Candle Therapeutics application for biosafety registration. Condition, obviously, with the additional information that we requested, that we'll review when they resubmit. But I will make a motion for conditional acceptance.
I second that.
Okay, all in favor?
All right. Do we have to do roll call or not because it's Zoom?
That's a great question. We'll roll call it just in case. Okay, great. Justin,
We do. Justin, aye.
John,
Aye.
Cy,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
and Julie. Aye. Okay, great. So we will be in touch with you about that, or Tiffany will probably send that to you again, because again, I can't communicate and get your comments because it would technically be us convening together per open meeting law. So I think Tiffany will probably send that out to everyone when we get it from the company. Great. So if there is not anything else, we can adjourn the meeting. So I can have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Oh, there you go.
Great. Okay. Roll call again. Justin,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Cy,
Aye.
Ed. Ed might be frozen. Uh-oh. Great. And Julie. Okay. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.